government spends money and they don't have the capacity to finance it.
They don't care about your well-being. Either you pay or you go to jail.
As the technology progresses, it's becoming harder and harder to detect.
Afghan forces rescued nearly 150 people hours after they were kidnapped in a Taliban ambush. Militants attacked 3 buses, abducting nearly 200 passengers traveling to Kabul for the Eid al-Adha holiday. It's a rejection of a conditional ceasefire announced yesterday by President Ashraf Ghani. For the first time in 8 years, Greece isn't relying on borrowed funds. It's officially finished its final bailout program after managing to achieve a small budget surplus. But it won't finish repaying the 289 billion euros it borrowed until at least 2060. A damaged fiber optic cable at London Gatwick Airport meant Monday morning passengers had to get their flight departure information from a bespoke alternative. 2 handwritten whiteboards in the middle of the concourse. As part of the thaw between North and South Korea, dozens of families that were separated when the country split reunited today for the first time in 65 years. But they'll only be able to see each other for 11 hours over 3 days. Venezuela's government has taken a desperate step to stop record-breaking inflation. Today, banks are integrating a new bill called the Sovereign Bolivar. It strikes 5 zeros off Venezuela's old currency, the Bolivar Fuerte, which has become little more than worthless paper. At the official exchange rate, $1 will buy almost 250,000 of the old currency.
Y tengamos un nuevo sistema financiero y monetario de estabilidad y protección para nuestro pueblo.
Arbitrarily setting a new denomination is a last-ditch move used by dictators such as Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe, and by governments trying to keep afloat during conflict. It doesn't address the problem, it just gives it a new name. And for shop owners like Oscar Diaz, that's causing more chaos, not less.
Lo único que sabemos que van a eliminar 5-0, pero no sabemos más nada. Todo se va a triplicar más, independientemente de que quiten los 5 ceros.
Los precios se ajustan semanal. Puede ir de un 15% a un 30%.
The government can't print cash fast enough to meet demand. Simple transactions, like buying cheese, now require a debit card.
Solamente vende si tiene punto de venta. Si no tiene punto de venta, no logra vender nada. No hay efectivo.
On Friday, Maduro's government announced another move to fight inflation, raising the minimum wage for the 5th time this year, from about $1 a month to $30. Shop owners worry they won't be able to afford the new rate.
Y bueno, si podemos tener todo el personal, lo mantenemos, y si no, habrá que hacer reducción.
Venezuela's government has sliced zeros off its currency before. In 2008, former President Hugo Chavez deleted 3. Economist Steve Hanke says moves like these don't address what's actually causing inflation.
The government spends money and they don't have the capacity to finance it. And the central bank turns on the printing press and the money supply explodes. And when a money supply explodes, inflation explodes.
The new currency is tied to Venezuela's oil market through a cryptocurrency that the government is calling Petro. But that cryptocurrency isn't even available to the public.
It's like going in and having a facelift. What happens? Well, you come out a little spiffier than you were when you went in. You look a little different, but you don't change, except the appearance that you have. And that's what this currency reform is doing.
These striking workers are African migrants who work in southern Italy's tomato fields. 16 of their fellow workers were killed in 2 separate car accidents earlier this month. The victims were passengers in overcrowded vans, returning from long shifts in the fields. The vans are run by gangmasters known as the Caporali. They act as middlemen for this entire industry, supplying farmers with cheap labour in exchange for a cut of the workers' wages. And because there's no public transport system here, they charge workers for rides to the fields, in uninsured vans often driven by overworked migrants. But the workers and the farmers depend on the Caporali, and no one we met was willing to help us find Caporali to speak on camera. But they were frank about how miserable the system can be.
Donc sinon c'est difficile ici, on vit, donc chacun suit son sort, n'importe comment. Mais d'ici 6h ou 5h, on est arrivé au champ, on peut travailler jusqu'à 17h, jusqu'à 18h. Des fois, on peut aller jusqu'à 20h. 2 heures pour celui dont le papier appartient. Maintenant, si tu ne parviens pas à faire 10 heures par jour, tu ne rentres pas même pas avec 20 € avec toi à la maison.
Italy's passed a new law to criminalise the Caporali system as a mafia crime. But the law doesn't penalise the middlemen themselves. It targets farmers, threatening up to 8 years in jail for any employer found to be hiring workers through the Caporali. And military police are stepping up their early morning spot checks to see which farms the Caporali vans are going to.
Perché prima della riforma della legge lui non aveva conseguenze, quindi poteva continuare a sfruttare il lavoratore cambiando soltanto intermediari. Adesso la legge colpisce direttamente il datore di lavoro, che è obbligato a sottostare anche lui a quelle che sono le regole a tutela dei lavoratori.
Not surprisingly, the farmers who power this $3.5 billion industry think it's unfair that they're the ones being targeted.
Viene preso sotto pomodoro rosso, grande rosso, tipo questo, no?
Enzo Smacchia has 40 acres of tomato fields on land passed down through his family. He insists he pays his workers fairly, but he admits that the industry depends on cheap labour. Why do you have to use the Caporali? What would happen if you cut them out?
Non li trovi. Loro si fidano soltanto del loro caporale, perché fra di loro c'è anche molta omertà.
How do you respond to people who say that you're part of the problem? You're one of those who's exploiting the migrants and you're responsible for mistreating them?
Che non siamo noi sfruttatori del caporalato. Noi siamo persone, umili persone, che la mattina ci alziamo la mattina presto, alle 4 alle 5 ci spezziamo la schiena fino alla sera. Lavoriamo dall'alba fino al tramonto per portarci una fetta di pane a casa. Non vanno a vedere, ma l'agricoltore, quanto guadagni? Quanto ti viene pagato un chilo di pomodori dal mercato?
Ludovico Vaccaro is a prosecutor for the region of Foggia, which produces about a third of Italy's processed tomatoes and hosts half a dozen illegal worker camps. It took us less than 24 hours to find the ghettos where migrants are living, and many of them tell us that they don't have the legal papers to be working, yet they're still employed.
Bisogna agire su tutti gli attori di questa catena. Le aziende non devono assumere lavoratori in condizioni di sfruttamento e vanno sottoposte a stringenti controlli. Terzo, bisogna fare in modo che i lavoratori non vivano in condizioni di povertà e di irregolarità che alimenta lo sfruttamento.
Despite these warnings from local authorities and a police promise to carry out more raids over the coming months, workers like Mohammed think the new rules might even make their situation worse. Do you have faith in this new law? Do you think that it's going to change anything?
Non.
Why?
Mais ceux qui veulent vivre de leur chair et qui n'ont pas de papier, comment ils vont vivre? Parce que le patron maintenant va dire qu'il ne va pas prendre quelqu'un qui n'a pas de papier. Et s'il dit qu'il ne va pas prendre quelqu'un qui n'a pas de papier, lui aussi, il va tomber maintenant dans d'autres chaos. Soit c'est pour voler, soit aussi pour aller demander comme les autres.
There's a good chance that senators will highlight their displeasure with Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos this week as they debate funding for her department. Specifically, Democrats may take her to task for a promise she made during her confirmation.
So you will enforce the gainful employment rule to make sure that these career colleges are not cheating students?
We will certainly review that rule.
You'll review it? You will not commit to enforce it?
And see that it is actually achieving what the intentions are.
Whatever DeVos and her team saw after reviewing the rule led them to cut it. But losing it could cost the government up to $5.3 billion and may affect a generation of students.
So what is, or I guess was, the gainful employment rule? Basically, non-degree programs like certificate programs that help you learn how to fix cars must help you become gainfully employed. The metric for this? Comparing debt to earnings a few years after graduation. The thought being that if your program isn't crap, then you should be able to get a job that allows you to reasonably pay back your loans. If the ratio for that program was too high, the program could be cut off from federal financial aid funds like Pell Grants or subsidized student loans. That could sink a problematic program or even a problematic school. In January 2017, when the Obama administration listed 800 programs that didn't make the cut, 98% were at for-profits, according to Inside Higher Ed. The department says that instead of the current rule, they will work to provide more information on all programs, including, at a minimum, median debt and median earnings. But the department has eliminated the penalty for leaving students riddled with debt. In the lead up to this announcement, the Education Department negotiated with representatives from nonprofits, for-profits, public and private universities, as well as others. But for their recommendations to take effect, the group had to reach a consensus. I talked to two people who were part of those negotiations, one who thinks the rule change is a step in the right direction, and one who doesn't. Sandy Sarge is an educational finance consultant who has worked with for-profit universities. She told me she thought the idea behind the original gainful employment rule wasn't a bad one.
If I take it from an altruistic perspective, I believe that somewhere in there was a true intent to give students information. All it was going to do was tell students, hey, this program's going to cost you a lot, and you'll be paying more than 8% of your earnings to pay down your debt. It was going to give them a piece of information.
But she was underwhelmed by the way the debt-to-earnings ratio is calculated, and she thinks the Education Department has alternative ways to punish bad actors.
There's program reviews, there's heightened cash monitoring, there's many schools around probationary participation, there's composite score issues, and I think that's one of the misconceptions is that this was the only way to be able to stop these evil for-profit schools from screwing our students.
The other guy, Chris Gannon, represents a student consumer advocacy group. He's pissed.
The department's essentially gutted the rules, so the protections that were there for students are not there anymore. For-profit college programs that aren't adequately preparing students for gainful employment, they're allowed to stay in place.
And he thought the administration wasn't actually negotiating in good faith.
I think the department came in knowing the rule that they wanted to write and basically wouldn't budge from that position during the negotiations. And sure enough, when they released the rule this last week, there's nothing that we said that we wanted included in the rule in there.
Here's one thing both of them agreed on. They wanted more data to try to figure out the right way to hold schools accountable for the education they provide. And there was actually a consensus around the table to meet again if the government could provide those figures. The only participant that voted that idea down was the government itself.
I don't believe that we would have all the data that you want, or data in such abundance that it would inform our decisions any more than they will this session.
Now, more data and time may not have helped that group reach a consensus, but the lack of one left power in the hands of the Department of Education. So the agency may work to make sure students access more information, but to make a decision itself, the department shut the conversation down.
Back on probation again.
Yeah.
Tell me what we got this time.
11 months, 29 days, probation, 80 hours community service. I've got a letter from my doctor about the community service hours.
James Ledbetter was arrested earlier this year on a charge of misdemeanor theft. Instead of jail time, he was put on probation under the supervision of PSI, a private company contracted by the county.
Probation fees are $45 per month.
The CEO of the business is Tim Cook.
We have a very interesting role in the justice system because sometimes we are more social workers, sometimes we get to be more on the prosecution side. It just kind of depends on what's called for that day.
PSI has been in the probation business since 1991, after Tennessee became one of the first states to allow private companies to run their probation operations, in the hopes that it would save the state money. Today, at least 10 states use some form of private probation. The companies make their money from probationers themselves, who not only pay fines for their infractions, but also monthly fees for supervision.
How much now owe altogether?
Right now, you're at $100.
Okay, big first will be Friday before I can get in for it.
Yep, no worries.
It's a system that's proven ripe for abuse. Private probation companies have been accused of prioritizing profit over rehabilitation, going to extraordinary lengths to force people to pay, and extending their probation for as long as possible. Tim Cook says his company doesn't operate that way.
Do you think that private probation gets a bad rap?
Oh, of course. It has over the past few years. And I think that there are some companies that have caused that. It is kind of more motivated by the money than by the services and the people that they're there to serve. I think it depends on, what is it your goal? And if your goal is solely to turn the profit, I'm sure there could be abuses just like in anything else. I just want PSI judged by what PSI has done. And I want us judged by what, the services that we've provided, how we've treated people, all that.
Cook's company is currently being judged as a defendant in a class action lawsuit that alleges the private probation model can never operate fairly. One of the complainants is Sonia Beard. In 2016, Beard was arrested for driving on a revoked license. A court in Giles County, Tennessee, ordered her to a year of supervised probation under PSI. But, she alleges, her probation officer didn't tell her that there were ways to get out of paying her fees if she truly couldn't afford it, leaving her with the impression that she could end up in jail for not paying.
They don't care about your well-being. They don't care if you're on disability. They don't care if you don't have a rod or if your license are revoked. You get here how you can get here.
In desperation, she borrowed more than $1,000 from a friend.
The judge gave me from December the 4th until December the 21st to pay off this probation. Either you pay or you go to jail.
In court filings, PSI has called the allegations of wrongdoing completely fabricated and false, and denied that Beard asked for her fees to be waived.
The thing that's alleged in this lawsuit that comes up repeatedly is that probation officers failed to tell people that there was essentially an out clause. If they really couldn't afford to pay them, they didn't have to.
We do have a fee waiver application. We go over the fees, but we don't go over, I doubt any of my officers are going over that you can have them waived. So, I don't know if that's the right or wrong thing to do, but there are things in place to get their fees waived if they need them waived, but it's going to be your responsibility.
From the point of view of probation officer, as you've described it, your incentive is to not have them come back, to get them through the system as effectively and efficiently as possible.
That should be any probation.
But the company's incentives, at least part of them, are to either get as much as you can from them while you have them, or keep them around as long as possible.
No.
Aren't those two things kind of at odds with one another?
No. My goal as a probation officer and somebody that, this is my profession, I want them out of the system and leading productive lives. So if I take care of the probation part of it, the finance part of it has always kind of taken care of itself, so to speak. We're never going to cure, crime, and I'm always going to have customers, around to take that one's place. So no, I think if you do that, you end up like some of the other companies that are no longer with us.
This is fake. Donald Trump wasn't actually in Young Frankenstein, and Steve Buscemi wasn't the star of Basic Instinct.
I'd have to be pretty stupid to write a book about killing and then kill somebody the way I described it in my book. I'd be announcing myself as the killer.
But thanks to the open-sourced facial replacement app called Deepfake, almost anyone can now be in almost anything.
I do not know the way.
You may remember last December, deepfakes burst onto Reddit in the form of massive amounts of porn, with the female performers' faces replaced with the faces of famous actresses. Reddit quickly banned the subreddit, saying it was, quote, a violation of our content policy, specifically our policy against involuntary pornography. But this technology is not just being developed by internet trolls. In Vancouver last week, the world's most important computer graphics companies and academic institutions gathered at SIGGRAPH to talk about their craft, and deepfakes was very much in the mix.
So on the left side, you see a source actor that is able to control a virtual avatar of another person, called target actor in this talk.
This is Justice Thies from the Technical University of Munich. Along with colleagues from Stanford, he is presenting the first real-time source-to-target reenactment approach for human portrait videos. It seems obvious to most that if this technology progresses further, it may be the center of the shitstorm that permanently ushers in the post-truth era.
Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. Stay woke, bitches.
The researchers here don't have an answer for this problem.
I'm just wondering, like, is this technique sort of available to everyone? And if you could just talk a tiny bit more about sort of where you see that going and the sort of ethical implications of the technology.
As a researcher, we're gonna still keep working on to detect such a misuse, and it's gonna put all the effort to prevent those misuse. Yes. Thanks.
I don't think there's a good answer to this in the sense that as the technology progresses, it's becoming harder and harder to detect, but it's becoming harder and harder to detect for humans. But as the technology progresses, we also have technological tools to detect what's real and what's fake.
That doesn't sound too convincing, and the government thinks this is a problem. This year, DARPA will spend more than $28 million developing a way to detect and debunk fake videos.
So we're playing a cat and mouse game. We detect the deepfake generated videos based on the fact that those faces in the fake videos do not blink. As of June, our detection accuracy is 100%. The battle is ongoing. I'm expecting the quality of the fake video to getting better and better in a sort of exponential speed.
Researchers may be able to detect a fake video, but people seeing those videos on their Facebook feed could still be fooled.